The WIEN Woman Podcast series is an initiative of the Women in Energy Network and features carefully curated conversations with female entrepreneurs and professionals across the oil, gas, power, and renewable energy sectors in Africa. The conversations in this series seek to redefine female leadership in an industry that is still largely male-dominated.
In each episode, we interview a WIEN woman about how they did it, what they wish they knew prior to starting, and what advice they have for upcoming ladies in this industry. Get ready to be lifted, empowered, and inspired.
Hi, I'm Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani.
And I am Charlotte Essiet.
And together we're your WIEN Woman Podcast hosts.
In today's episode, we have an interesting young woman. And we'll be interviewing Rosario Osobase. She's the Managing Director of Tenaris Nigeria Limited. It's so nice to have you here, sis.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And Rolake?
Yeah, nice to see you on the show,
Yeah,
Rosario.
always nice to see you.
Indeed. Indeed. So tell us a bit about yourself, Rosario.
Okay, this is a very, when they say tell you about yourself, like, the last podcast speaker spoke about, you don't know where to start from. How do you embody a 42-year-old woman? But yeah, I would say I'm married with 3 kids, and I started my career actually in the bank as a teller. Of course, with a background in computing, I'd mostly always, been a very techie person. And I got my big break in 2006, where I got the opportunity to work in one of the world's largest oil field services, Schlumberger at the time, now SLB. And I started my career essentially logging and measuring formation properties to determine commercial viability of the wellbore.
So you studied engineering or?
No, not at all. And that's why I said it's an interesting background because, I studied computing.
Okay.
But because in those days or in those years, there was a dearth of talent and there was requirements for talents offshore, they also considered physical sciences, as, in that tech space. So this helped me, obviously, coming from a very techie background, it helped me launch into the foundation that, was required to build in the energy sector. It was a very good experience because I was working deep offshore Nigeria, logging for one of the biggest assets in Nigeria, offshore of Nigeria, the Bonga assets. And I know cumulatively, I probably drilled and logged about 18 wells on that asset. It was very interesting because from the early stages of, just taking on a trainee role to the point where I was leading the jobs and managing the jobs by myself, I quickly learned and honed skills around being very responsible, having the critical ability to make real-time decisions, and just building my leadership, generally speaking. And it also helped me to have a very good foundation about the industry today that I know. And I would guess that I evolved afterwards, right, to support the field population from town. And the experience I had built, the foundation I had built helped me, to provide that support to the field population from town because critical decision-making was required in real time. Considering rigs go for about, in today's age, $200,000 per day. Spread rates easily up to $500,000. In those days, it was up to $1 million. So you know that a critical operation is at stake if you're not making your decisions in real time. And obviously, supporting the field population to take those decisions also helps my ability to think very quickly on my feet. I honed that skill as well. I honed the skill on communication as well. And I, again, continue to evolve my leadership, some of the soft and transferable skills that I hold today and I continue to apply. And yeah, from there on, I moved on to, more sales roles. given my very technical background. It was a very interesting, let's say, diversion, because I'd always mostly been technical, being, in charge and responsible for the rig crews, the rig assets, in terms of the equipment we were deploying to the rig, and even just giving accountability for the entire process at the end of the job. So coming into sales, I believe that some of the skills that I had built were also useful in the sales role. As I evolved in that role, I eventually built critical skills around networking, around building. I saw the importance of building relationships, because obviously those relationships translated eventually to business opportunities, eventually which translated to revenues for the companies that I worked with at the time. And I think it was in that sales role that I got my next big break, which was my role as a commercial head for the business of Tenaris in Nigeria. And it was very interesting dynamics, because I was moving from Schlumberger now SLB, to a company that sells pipe. I was departing from my comfort zone. But again, I've always prided myself as someone who likes to do the hard things. That's one. And then secondly, I don't run away from challenges. When I'm faced with a challenge, I'd always like to take it head on, and just see what that challenge brings about, because I believe that hidden behind every challenge is an opportunity, if you know how to harness it. So I took the opportunity and I took the role, and of course I continued to strengthen some of the skills I had already built, leverage them for the role, and then built my business acumen, built also around my strategic thinking. Again, critical thinking was also required in the role, networking, very strong networking, and influencing skills, right? Convincing someone to release a PO to you, or, is something that you really need to be very convincing. And some of the skills eventually saw me evolving again, my leadership skills, because I was also responsible for building the commercial team in Nigeria. So when I took on the role, there was, for lack of a better word, there was not the ideal structure for the commercial team in the country. And so I had to recruit the team, from scratch, and then build a portfolio of the commercial team that we today have. And those teams have gone ahead to do very big things. They're moving ahead to head businesses in other areas in Africa. And for me, it's very rewarding as a person, because I've always been big on people development. And I would say that moving on from there, last year, I got the opportunity again to take on the leadership role in the organization. And since then, managing the business in Nigeria, you have to have very strong relationships with the industry stakeholders, externally and internally. So I've built a focus on not just the business strategy in Nigeria, executing the business strategy in Nigeria, but also building relationships with our stakeholders in an all-round manner to ensure that the business in Nigeria is sustainable.
Wow.
So I hope...
That's been quite the journey.
Right.
I was going to ask you that story. What's the span of years of that story? Did you go literally from kindergarten to...
Roughly 19 years coming 1st of October.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Fantastic.
Wow.
So in I think I'll take you back, because you went on very techie, and I didn't want to stop the flow. So you have some people who are listening to us who don't even understand what it is to log. Because he went from logging into, so it's obviously this is just full wireline logging. So when you log and then you measure, a lot of people, I think, what is she measuring? Is she logging wood? What are we talking about? So break it
or
down.
logging in on a computer.
Right. Very interesting
So
question.
break that part down for folks to understand exactly what you were doing whilst you were logging and pulling up measurements.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. Okay. Sometimes I get into my techie space and I forget that there are other people around as well that need to learn. As a formation evaluation engineer, you're essentially logging the formation. I mean, the ground, like the soil on the ground. But you're doing this. For me, I was mostly assigned to deepwater offshore Nigeria. And this meant that I was logging offshore Nigeria. What that meant essentially is that you send tools downhole, and when the tools are downhole, you monitor on screens to see the responses coming from downhole. Of course, we have sensors installed up, on surface, and these sensors pass signals to us that we kind of process, and based on the signals that we are receiving, we can tell if this is a pay zone, and a pay zone is essentially where there is oil, or if it's a water zone, and based off of that, you can also, in certain cases, determine the viability of the formation. What that means is, or the viability of the pay zone, sorry. So what that means is that, yes, sometimes you might have oil, but it's not in commercial quantity, so there's no need to go further. But sometimes you hit a pay zone and you're like, wow, this is a lot of money, and obviously it's very encouraging for the companies. In my particular case, it was the international oil companies I was mostly drilling for, and that way they can make decisive decisions about next steps in assessing or developing their assets to be commercially viable for them.
So obviously a very critical role. So thanks for taking us through that masterclass 101 on logging. So you're now an MD, you're a CEO, you're at the C-suite. You told us your age. Women never do that, so we know you're 42. So you're a young CEO in this market, and people often have the perception that in this industry you have to really have come from a technical background to rise to that C-suite, but you didn't necessarily study one of the engineering or geologies that so what does that say about what else it takes to get to the C-suite? Did you find you really had to pull on all those other soft skills that you built along the way? Tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that you require technical skills, to rise to the top. You don't necessarily do, but again, coming from a computing background, I already had the foundation that was required to build any set of skills that, I so desire. And the experience offshore already gave me a very firm foundation to do that.
Yeah.
And obviously, this helped me to build all my technical skills, right? Being offshore, understanding what the cost is on the rig, understanding the services, the different services of exploration and production, gave me like a head start. But beyond building a solid foundation, I also believe that those soft skills that you mentioned, like you mentioned, communication, networking, engaging people, just relationships, all those very soft and transferable skills were also key for me, because if I needed to, for instance, when I was offshore, if I needed to get a job done, sometimes there are heavy machineries that when I look at them, I'm like, man, I'm not carrying that, But, I'll just look around and spot somebody, maybe a nice looking gentleman, and I'll walk up to him politely and say, oh, please, could you help me with that? And they would be willing to help me, and somehow I noticed that even in those early stages, having a relationship with people or building, critical interpersonal skills with people kind of helped you to do the job well, and I've used those skills over the years, my interpersonal skills, not just on the technical side, but I've also developed those skills on the non-technical side, the commercial side now, which I continue to leverage. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is that I believe that as a leader, for me, while yes, I'm all about the business strategy, making money for my company, it's also important to me to invest in people, developing people, because I always say that, if you don't develop people, you can't even move upwards.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've also done, maybe by chance, because it's not like I had it very clear from the get-go, but I just transferred the interpersonal skills I had, that I had built over the years, to also coaching and mentoring people at will, instantaneously, or even maybe formally. So I had various opportunities to do that, maybe offshore Nigeria or in the offices, where I helped people hone their own skills as well and gave them maybe clarity in those early stages when we're all, just trying to figure out things, and I think that eventually now I see that that's a critical skill, for leadership, because you have to be about looking around the room, identifying who your key talents are, and seeing how to develop them to ensure that the business is sustainable in the long run. Because in the long run, without people, you can't execute any business.
And it's really interesting that throughout everything you've said, I noticed, I picked up on something, which is you've never once mentioned your awareness about being a woman in all these environments. So that's very interesting because you find some people, you ask them questions, they're already talking about gender dynamics. And all these environments, Charlotte, you know now, offshore environment, those are hard hats and boots, hardcore. So was it that you were just focused on the work, or you didn't kind of recognize all those gender nuances, the diversity issues? And
so the first comment is that I'm not ignorant of the fact that, there's always been, that gender imbalance, especially in the sector where I work, right? But let's pack that for a sec. I was raised by a father who believed in me before I believed in myself, right? God rest his soul. And I know that my dad would always tell me, you can do this, and he would push you to do it. And he would make the environment conducive enough for you to thrive. And because of that, I grew up not seeing my gender as a limitation. I recall when I was moving from JS 3 to SS1, and we were like, okay, there's A, B, C, D. A was arts, B was business, C was pure sciences, and D was technical sciences. And we were looking at it, and most of the ladies in my set were gravitating towards the arts and the business classes. And my dad was like, you should do sciences, right? Because I think it would differentiate you. But I never understood. I was a child, so this was just my dad guiding me through life. Let me put it that way. And I took on sciences. Would I say it was easy? No. When I started further maths, at some point I dropped it. I was like, of course. But honestly, I dropped it at some point because I felt it was really hard for me. But I realized eventually later on in life that my father gave me the foundation that I required to be able to not see my gender as a limitation in everything I do. So when I enter a room, I'm not thinking, oh, I'm a woman. I'm thinking, oh, we are human beings here. And everybody looking at me here, right? Yourself, we're all human beings first. So that's my own, let's say, that's the lens with which I kind of view even my work or my professional life. So my evolution from banking to FMCG and now to the energy industry, I've never seen myself, my gender as a limitation. That being said, I would say that there's something I like saying. I recognize there's discrimination in the world, and there is always going to be discrimination. But I will tell everyone watching, everyone listening, that it's not a reason for you not to succeed. So you can go ahead and succeed despite the discrimination that, you are met with. And maybe because I brought a positive attitude and not labeling my gender or, stereotyping my gender in the forefront of every professional job I had done, it was easy for me to build relationships with male allies that kind of helped me through the process of, my professional career up till now. And I still do have them. I have them at different levels. I have them at, I've had them at different transition points, and I still have them now. You really do need a sponsor. And for our own context as women in energy, I believe that the male allies are critical for your success or your advancement, because, hey, we work in a male-dominated environment. So how would you say that you do not need the men to thrive? So, and those male allies help me, they influence, for instance, my thought process. So if I have an idea, I can bounce it off people. I also watch them. A lot of times, I also tell people that sometimes you don't have access to the mentors you desire, and sometimes the mentors too, they're overwhelmed. They have their own full-time job. They have many moving parts as well that they have to contend with. But for me, even just watching them from afar, I'm learning. I'm learning and I'm evolving my skills based on some of the things that I pick from them. So I believe that this is how I see the gender lens in the industry. But I also agree that now we need to be a bit more deliberate in building the capacity of women to take on additional senior roles in the industry, given the dearth of female talents at the C-suite level.
Very well said.
You mentioned the FMCG part of you. Did you pick that?
Yes, I noticed. So you've been in different industries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened from
It's like a
banking
chameleon who's been changing colors.
Different
I'm
colours.
doing so well.
Very well. Please just give us a brief on that, because I'm like, I didn't know there was an FMCG story to Rosario.
Interesting. 2 years. It was earlier on in the career where I was trying to figure out my life, brand new from school or graduating from school. I mentioned I started in a bank as a teller.
Yes.
I did about 2 years in the bank before moving on to FMCG, specifically British American Tobacco.
Oh.
Yes, more on an analyst level, mostly providing critical help desk function to the field population. Okay. Again, it was a technical job because you computer, but beyond that, you have to take calls from the field population, and they would have to describe the problems they were encountering on the field, and you would attempt to solve them. So this also helped me. One of the skills I developed from that process was problem solving. And today I like to say that, if you have to describe me and what embodies me, it's my ability to think very critically and very quickly on my feet. And I believe that some of the experiences from FMCG, going on to real-time logging, real-time decision-making kind of helped me to hone that skill, strengthen it, and I leverage it today for the business.
No experience is ever wasted.
Absolutely.
So, Rosario, in all of this up and downs, of course, as the C-suite leader, it's not easy also dealing with the children. Mm-hmm. So you must have a support system, a functional support system. How does this happen for you? Actually, you have 4 babies, to be honest.
I agree.
So let's
What
go.
are the ages?
She has 3 children and the husband.
I missed that. I was a bit slow. But yeah.
Okay, yes, but I have 3 kids. The first is turning 13 in a couple of days. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And yes, I would say, like, as with every woman, that it's not an easy journey. In the early stages of motherhood and juggling an active career, it can be, very demanding. And in those phases, the tendency is to throw in the towel for your professional career and just focus on the family, which, I respect, every human's and every woman's decision. But, I believe that one of the things that early stages of motherhood will teach you is resilience and adaptability. And I always say that one of the strongest skills of being a mother, a full-time mother, and a full-time employee, especially in a 9-to-5, is organizational skills. Yes. You need to know how to plan. You need to know how to put structures in place as well. So I would say that for me to try with my 3 kids, plus 1, I am very structured in my approach at work, but I also transfer the same structures to the home. So for starters, I have a very solid support system in place, to help me, from the nannies to the drivers to the chef. I would tell you a very short story, and I think it could be relatable for a lot of women, at the younger ages of motherhood. When I started out, as a mom, second-time mom, my first was about 3 years old, and my second was a baby. I was so overwhelmed. And I had this postpartum depression, right? So I was struggling to juggle work and motherhood. And I was going like, a train nonstop. At some point, I felt like I was losing it. I wasn't in control. And I recall that day, I made a phone call to my husband. He was still at work. I called him and I said, you need to come home now. And he was like, is everything okay? I'm like, yes, but you need to come home now. And he said to me, okay, I'll be back home soon. And I think he came in at about 9:30, 10, and we had a conversation. I was just like, he was like, is everything okay, Rosario? And I was like, no, it's not okay. It's not okay. I'm overwhelmed. And I don't think you're throwing your weight. I remember telling him that. And my husband is very patient. And those who know my husband know he's also very calm. So he kind of sat through that, listened to me. And when I was done with, all the drama, he now said, you know what? He said, what is overwhelming me? I was like, I have to pick the kids up. I have to come back. I have to cook. I wake up at 4 to prepare them for school. I have to make their breakfast, lunch, for school, everything. And it's just so overwhelming. And that time, I would have to drive myself to work. And then he looked at me and he was like, I've told you, quit the mundane task. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. What's mundane? Taking care of you and the kids? I was like, yeah, it's mundane. Focus on your work. Just make sure you put structures. It was my husband who first told me to put structures. You can imagine that the very next day, I went shopping for a chef, a nanny, a driver, and I never looked back. And I don't feel guilty. I take care of my kids. Those who know me know that I take care of my kids very well, right? But the fact that I put structures to help me navigate the workspace doesn't mean that, I don't care about my kids. When I'm there for them, I'm there for them. And the reality is that, we should, this story about having it all, I don't think it's really possible. Some things have to give for some other things to make way.
Absolutely.
And if you have structures and if you know how to plan properly and be very organized, then you know when to prioritize your kids, when to prioritize your work, and when to prioritize every other moving part that you have. So this is what my experience has been.
That is such I think, an important point to share there, because there are probably a lot of women who are in a similar position, or just starting out in their career. And someone told me that it's not a case of you can have it all, but you can have it all with support.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, and I think that support
That's
is in and
that's
out
a
of
good
season
framing.
as well.
I agree with the framing.
It's
Correct.
But thanks for sharing that. I think it's really inspirational. So as we kind of wrap up now, looking at your journey, what are your aspirations for the future? Where is this heading now? Is it world domination? You want to head the International Energy Agency? What does the future of the next 5-10 years look like for Rosario?
The way you have framed it, one would think I would respond to say, yes, head the international agency. But, I have 3 focus right now. My first and primary focus is on my family, building more intimacy with them, with my husband, with my kids. I just described their ages, 13, going 10, on 13, 10, 7. These are all critical ages, right? And we need to be present as parents. Personally, I need to be present as mothers as they evolve. Very shortly, they're out of the house. So this is the time you get to know your kids, you get to know their strengths and hone those strengths. And then obviously you get to know the parts where they still need to develop or board, and just help them to continue to evolve to wholesome beings that, they are called to be. So I would say that for me, that first focus is on my family and that intimacy with them. The second focus, obviously, I've not neglected my career in any way, right? I still have a strong focus on career. And for me, this is just a starting point, right? I still see myself leading and managing global businesses, in the long term. I have a very strong interest or keen interest in energy and energy security, given the fact that obviously I work in a critical sector that has the potential to revolutionize the lives of many Africans and Nigerians, So I believe that whatever I can give in that space to ensuring that energy now becomes, accessible to all, in my own way, would be also a critical part of my long-term future. And I seek opportunities to give back, to collaborate, and to strengthen a pathway for energy access for Nigerians and Africa. And then the third one, maybe, most interesting right now, is the fact that a few years ago, 2019, I had to contend with 2 sick parents, my dad and my mom. My mom, cancer. My dad lost his mobility. He passed on eventually last year. It was really tough, right? It was a tough season in my life. I would say 2019 was the hardest he had ever, encountered. But I came through very strong. But that was because, obviously, I applied all the skills that I have described, to kind of help me make very well-informed decisions. But it also taught me life's frailty. And frailty to the extent that, I saw life sniffing past my mom and my dad. And somewhat I was helpless. I could only do as much as I could do, right? And it taught me the value of not in the midst of, trying to juggle a successful career, building a thriving family, not, sacrificing your health. And my third and most focused area is to continue to strengthen my health through my lifestyle. I've recently taken on many active lifestyle goals. Right now I run, I work, I work out just to keep fit, and also kind of watch the environment just to make sure that I'm doing the right things, well, to the best of my own control, and then leaving the rest to God. So I know when to break, I know when to stop, I know when to start, I know when to accelerate. I have a lot of energy, obviously. So when I need to give that energy, I give in. When I need to, recline and, sit back the energy I've lost, I know how to balance that as well. So these are my own focus going into the long term. So one, like I said, my family is always priority. Second, my career, I need to continue to evolve. I would love to take on more leadership roles in multiple industries. I have a keen focus on energy right now to make sure that there's access for, the variety of Nigerians who have, a gap in energy access right now. And then thirdly, my lifestyle goals to ensure that I live a healthy life that sees me through all these, my multiple, let's say, hats and desires that I have. Yeah.
Wow. What a conversation.
Absolutely. Rosario is always running. So every morning when I wake up, when I look at my phone, I've seen her wake up status. I feel guilty.
Maybe we should start a running club in WIEN.
We should. That would be lovely.
It's been so great hearing from Rosario Osobase, Engr of Tenaris Nigeria. Wow,
Thank you.
Charlotte, what a conversation.
We had fun, and a lot of nuggets to take home.
Indeed.
Especially taking care of your health. That's extremely important.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for joining the show.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of the WIEN Woman Podcast. See you next time.
Bye.